what counts as explicit content? I'm going to be honest, the bar is very low. I do suggest watching a lot of this video because there's a lot of things you do need to know if you do have explicit content in your music. Now I'm on the site iMusician right now, as you can see. This is for any release, whether it's on DistroKid, TuneCore, CD Baby, and more. And you can see that it applies when the lyrics or content of a song contains one or more of the following criteria, which could be considered offensive or unsuitable for children. So strong language, violence, physical or mental abuse references to sexual behavior, and discriminatory language. Basically, and here's the big thing I think for most people watching this video, one F-bomb marks it as explicit. And I think that is a bit unfortunate, because like you're like, hey Mark, I've only swore 3 times in this song. It's explicit. If you only swear once, it is explicit. So looking at these notes down here, and this is even more kind of tricky, right? Is that you have to mark your tracks or your entire release as explicit, and iTunes or most stores may hide your release if the content is not marked accordingly. In addition, and this is kind of intense, I get it, but at the same time it is kind of strict. As soon as you mark one track as explicit on your album, the entire release, your entire release, will be labeled as explicit. There are certain stores and areas that do not accept explicit content, so keep that in mind. And then lastly, which I think is kind of interesting, if no track is marked as explicit and the parental advisory explicit content logo is used on the album artwork, all tracks will be marked as explicit. So there are a few different things you really kind of need to consider. And I do think this is unfortunate, right? Because you're talking about creative expression, and when you're an artist, you're thinking about ways to express certain ideas and concepts. It is unfortunate that the bar for explicit content is pretty low. So, as you saw from that, let's say you have a 10-track album, and in only one of the songs you have one F-bomb. Not only is that entire song now completely explicit from just one F-bomb, but that entire release, your entire album now is explicit. And as you can imagine, that immediately brings you from having a release everywhere to now certain limitations and restrictions. It is something to keep in mind, because in some cases, I think it's just inevitable, right? People swear in their albums and in their music. I mean, that's just part of being a musician, right? A lot of musicians do. And in addition, take, let's say, which is getting a lot more popular now, if you, let's say, release a comedy album. Let's say you're not even a musician, but you do stand-up comedy, swearing, and, of course, offensive topics are very popular in stand-up comedy. It will be marked as explicit. This is something, though, I do want to bring up because on one end, I know for some genres, take like hip-hop, rock, metal, etc., swearing's almost inevitable in a lot of songs, and you don't really think anything of it, it's going to be explicit. But let's say you're an EDM artist like myself. Let's say you have a 10-track album, and on only one of the songs, right before the drop, let's say there's no lyrics, but like as we all know in EDM, sometimes it's not really like lyrics, it's just words before the drop, and that's it. And let's say right before the drop, you have something like, everybody effing bounce, and you drop that F-bomb, the full F-bomb. It is now explicit, and the entire album is explicit. And so for me, if let's say I was a hip-hop artist, I'd feel a bit different. I'm like, it's going to be explicit no matter what, whatever. But if I was an EDM artist, making, let's say, a 10-track album, and only one of the songs has one F-bomb, I might change it. I might literally say, not abbreviating it, I might literally say, everybody effing bounce. I might even say, I think even Martin Garrix on Annals, did he kind of, I guess he kind of said the F-bomb, but not really. It was a bit muffled, so it was kind of a gray area. It wasn't like a full-on clear F-bomb. But if I was an EDM, or if I was releasing an EDM album, and I only had one F-bomb, I'd probably change it. Because I'm like, hey, why have the entire thing be marked as explicit when it's not really adding any creativity or anything into the track? It's the only F-bomb in the entire album. I don't really need it. I could probably think of a different word, right? So this is something to keep in mind. And then lastly, which I do think is really interesting, is the album artwork. That let's say if your entire album is not explicit, it's actually, let's say, G-rated, for example, to use like a movie analogy, when you have that little icon on your album artwork, it will be marked as explicit. This is interesting. I'm not going to lie. I feel like, let me know what you think in the comments if I'm right or wrong about this. I I feel like it doesn't have the same like oomph or hit it used to. I remember in the 90s when I was growing up and I walked through, let's say, a record store or CD store like FYE or one of those, and I'd see all the different CDs. I remember even like my mom, for example, if let's say I was like, oh, like I want to get this like album, and she didn't know who like Eminem was, for example, she'd see that little like icon on the album artwork, and she'd be like, no, you're not going to get that. In case you don't know, because I feel like it doesn't have the same oomph nowadays that it used to. But back in the day, that little icon was kind of like, it wasn't like a meme. That's not a good way to word it, but it was like, it was a big, like everyone knew it. It was almost like a cool thing to have that on your album artwork. I even saw people with, t-shirts with just the parental advisory like icon on it. And it basically meant, for those who don't know, to use an equivalent, it basically said, like, to use a movie analogy again, this album is rated R, right? To use a movie analogy. So it's a big thing for a lot of parents to know it, right? And it was kind of like its own meme itself. Like, I've even seen now, people post, like, a funny meme or a meme that goes hard, so to speak, of just somebody doing something, and they'll put that sticker on it as a joke, right? So I don't know if it still has the same hit, and I do know that I think artists, I think they still use it, but nowadays, on streaming services, on different platforms, they usually, and they do, mark everything as explicit if it is explicit. But back in the day, you didn't know. You're literally judging a book by its cover and look at the album artwork, right? Now, though, if you go on Spotify, there will be notes on it. So I feel like having to put that on your album artwork isn't as necessary as before, but that is something to keep in mind. Let's say you want to do it as a joke or just as something like kind of funny. There is a chance that, let's say, if someone scans it, or let's say a human sees it or whatever, they'll be like, oh, wait, there's a parental advisory sticker. Well, they didn't mark this as explicit. Now they have to, right? But at the end of the day, right, I know, like, giving you some different viewpoints and some of my own perspectives on this, I think at the end of the day, just, it is something to keep in mind that the bar is just super low. And it is unfortunate. Like I said, whether you're a musician or, like I said, even a comedian, like, say you release, I don't know, spoken word. And I know that's getting a lot more popular as well, especially when, I can't remember his name, he won AGT a few years ago, whatever. Like, say you do spoken word, and then one of your, like, poetry, like a spoken word, I wonder what the word is, not songs, but pieces, I'll call it a piece. And when your spoken word pieces, you do drop one F-bomb or whatever. Yes, that will actually count as explicit. It is kind of unfortunate because the bar is super low just to immediately make all of your songs explicit, and it's almost like going from 0 to 60 and just one F-bomb, but it's definitely something that you need to keep in mind.